We're in the book of Judges. Last week you began talking about Samson, mostly really talking about his mother and father last week. And Derek noted, and I think appropriately so, that Samson was to be a Nazirite, but notice that because of that, his mother was required to follow the Nazirite instructions and rules, which means, effectively, that he was a Nazirite from the moment of conception. Now that seems to hint at something that we don't talk about very often. That is that God views life as beginning at conception. If He doesn't, then you're going to have to explain that passage to me because that's what it seems to lay out. And we would believe that if we're talking about anything except a human being. If, for example, you were to raid an eagle's nest and take an egg, you will be put in jail. It's just that simple. So, we understand it when we're talking about birds, but we don't understand it with people. I'm not sure I get how we got there, but that's where we are. All right. So, chapter 14 now, we've at last got Samson alive, and he begins to act. We want to pick up at verse 1. Now Samson went down to Timnah and saw a woman in Timnah of the daughters of the Philistines. So he went up and told his father and mother, saying, I've seen a woman in Timnah of the daughters of the Philistines. Now therefore, get her for me as a wife. Then his father and mother said to him, Is there no woman among the daughters of your brethren or among all my people, that you must go and get a wife from the uncircumcised Philistines? And Samson said to his father, Get her for me, for she pleases me well. But his father and mother did not know that it was of the Lord, that he was seeking an occasion to move against the Philistines. For at that time the Philistines had dominion over Israel. Okay. Don't understand all about that. I know what the Scripture says, and I'll follow along with that. I also know the concern of his mother and father. Turn, if you would, to the book of Exodus for just a minute. Exodus chapter 34, and we want to pick up at verse 11 there and hear what God tells them as they're getting ready to go into this new land. Observe what I command you this day. Behold, I'm driving out from before you the Amorite and the Canaanite and the Hittite and the Perizzite and the Hivite and the Jebusite. Take heed to yourself, lest you make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land where you're going, lest it be a snare in your midst. But you should destroy their altars, break their sacred pillars, and cut down their wooden images. For you shall worship no other God, for the Lord, whose name is jealous, is a jealous God. Lest you make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land, and they play the harlot with their gods, and make sacrifice to their gods, and one of them invites you to eat of his sacrifice, and you take his daughters for your sons, and his daughters play the harlot with their gods, and make your sons play the harlot with their gods. Now we know why his mom and dad were saying, you can't find a woman in the land of Israel. You got to go down to the Philistines and find one. Well, somehow or other, the Spirit of the Lord is working in Samson, and what he's doing is going to give an opportunity to deal with these people who are oppressing God's people. Now, how does that work? I don't know. I understand the Spirit works. I got that. I could show you many verses about that. But how does this work in this case? I don't know. But it does work. And we see that in the story that follows. So they do go down and make the arrangements. Let's pick up at verse 5. So Samson went down to Timnah with his father and mother and came to the vineyards of Timnah. Now to his surprise, a young lion came roaring against him. And the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon him, and he tore the lion apart as one would have torn apart a young goat, though he had nothing in his hand. But he did not tell his father or his mother what he had done. Then he went down, talked with the woman, and she pleased Samson well. After some time, when he returned to get her, he turned aside to see the carcass of the lion, and behold, a swarm of bees and honey were in the carcass of the lion. He took some of it in his hands and went along eating. When he came to his father and mother, he gave them, or some to them, and they also ate. But he did not tell them that he'd taken the honey out of the carcass of the lion. Several things going on here. First of all, you have to understand how they did marriage back in those days. Marriage was not something where guys dated gals, and one day the guy decided, this is the woman I like to. Would you? And she said yes. And it doesn't work that way. Oh, that's the way it works here. I'm not going to single anybody out, but that's the way it works here in the United States in our era, but not then. In that era, it was not uncommon for mom and dad to make arrangements for marriage, even when the child was very young, even very small. They might do that, and then they would be what's called betrothed. It's more serious than our engagement. I've known some that were engaged multiple times to different people before they finally found someone and got married. So we take engagement maybe a little lightly. They did not. Betrothal was serious. In fact, they literally would call someone, a man would call this woman his wife, though they had yet to actually formalize the marriage. It's by contract. It's already set up. It's going to be. That's why when you get to Matthew chapter 1, you got Joseph and Mary's with child, and he's trying to decide, okay, now what do I do? Basically, and he wanted to be good to her and kind, and so he prepared to quietly divorce her. So notice the word divorce, but they never lived together as husband and wife. It's just the contract that was set up by mom and dad of both when they were younger. So that's a little bit of the background that's going on here in this particular place. So he goes to mom and dad and he says, I found this woman down at Timnah, a Philistine woman. And of course, we've already seen they don't like that idea, but he's doing it because the Lord wants him to. On the path down, he is attacked by a lion, a young lion, but he deals with it with his hands. That's kind of hard to imagine. In fact, I don't even know how you deal with a goat with your hands. It seems to think that's pretty easy. I don't know. I never have contemplated that because he didn't have anything in his hands. It's just bare hands, lion against man in this case, and he deals with it and kills it. And then when they're on the way back, he turns aside to see what's happened to the lion. And any one of us might do the same thing. You ever turn aside to see maybe a certain place where something happened that was significant, and that's what he did. He went to check, and lo and behold, here's the lion's carcass, which is kind of amazing to me. Here in this part of Mississippi, a lion's carcass, if it was laying on the side of the road, would be devoured in about 24 hours. We have a healthy supply of buzzards, and I don't think the carcass would have lasted, but there it is. And inside the carcass is the honey. I don't know all the ramifications of that. He is a Nazirite, so he's really not supposed to touch the carcass. But I guess he reaches inside and gets the honey without touching it. Again, the text doesn't give me that. I have to just say that's what I assume because I know who he is and what he's about. He is, after all, a Nazirite, and he has to keep that vow. All right, pick up at verse 10 then. So his father went down to the woman. Samson gave a feast there, for young men used to do so. All right, so this is custom as well. When you're going to get married to a woman, you throw a feast that you're going to eat. And if you think about it, go back to the parables of Jesus, you've got a parable that seems to fit that, don't you think? You got Matthew chapter 25, verses 1 through 13, is the parable of the 10 virgins. What are they doing? They're waiting for the bridegroom to come, and he's going to go in. There's going to be a wedding party, right? Of course, he's kind of slow getting there. I don't know. Maybe everybody's saying congratulations to him as he goes along, talking. I don't know. Text doesn't tell me that. But that's where that background comes from. It's part of this that we're looking at here. So pick up at verse 11, chapter 14 of Judges. And it happened when they saw him that they brought 30 companions to be with him. You're going to have a party, you got to have folks, right? So they bring 30 companions. Then Samson said to them, "Let me pose a riddle to you. If you can correctly solve and explain it to me within the 7 days of the feast, then I'll give you 30 linen garments and 30 changes of clothing. But if you cannot explain it to me, then you shall give me 30 linen garments and 30 changes of clothing." Then they said to him, "Pose your riddle that we may hear it." So he said to them, "Out of the eater came something to eat. Out of the strong came something sweet." Well, I don't know about you, but if I didn't know the background, I would not likely get the riddle. In fact, I don't give many riddles, so I really would have trouble with this one because I don't have a background that would let me know that. Now, for 3 days, they could not explain the riddle. But it came to pass on the 7th day that they said to Samson's wife, "Entice your husband that he may explain the riddle to us, or else we'll burn you and your father's house with fire. Have you invited us in order to take what is ours? Is that not so?" Okay. Now remember, these are not per se Samson's friends. These are 30 people that they invited to come celebrate with him at their daughter's wedding feast. That's how that all transpires. So they feel like that he's told the riddle to enrich himself, and indirectly, you might say, enrich her too, because she's going to be married to him. And so notice the threat that they make. It seems to me the threat's what motivates her. If you don't tell us, we're going to burn you, your father's house, and all of you in it, basically, is the idea. So, verse 16, then Samson's wife wept on him and said, "You only hate me. You do not love me. You've posed a riddle to the sons of my people, but you've not explained it to me." And he said to her, "Look, I've not explained it to my father and my mother. So should I explain it to you?" Now, by the way, that may be the best question Samson ever asked a woman. Right there. But anyway, just throwing that out. Now, she had wept on him the 7 days while their feast lasted. And it happened on the 7th day that he told her because she pressed him so much. Then she explained the riddle to the sons of her people. So the men of the city said to him on the 7th day before the sun went down, "What is sweeter than honey, and what is stronger than a lion?" And he said to them, "If you had not plowed with my heifer, you would not have solved my riddle." I'm not sure. I have never called Teresa my heifer, and I'm not figuring on starting today, okay? But within this story, it's understandable, what he's talking about. They got the answer, and he knew where they got the answer because he knew the only other person knew the answer. And here they are repeating the answer, and I think he'd figured out they're not going to know unless somebody tells them. That's basically the idea. So verse 19, then the Spirit of the Lord came upon him mightily as he went down to Ashkelon and killed 30 of their men, took their apparel, and gave the changes of clothing to those who had explained the riddle. Well, he didn't go to Walmart. He went to Ashkelon. Ashkelon is a Philistine city. And so he goes and finds Philistines. I mean, that's basically what we're talking about here. and he kills them and takes their clothing and just fulfills his commitment. Of course, they don't know where he got the clothes from, and he satisfies the commitment. But now that's not all he did, is it? Look at the end of the verse and on down. So his anger was aroused, and he went back up to his father's house. And Samson's wife was given to his companion, who had been his best man. He's so angry that he can't go into her. He cannot consummate the marriage. He goes home, and his father-in-law assumes he's not coming back. Now, I don't know the whole background of this, but this is a young lady that doesn't mind using tears to get what she wants. And it may be, I notice the words I use, it may be that she really, her daddy knew she was going to torment him if he didn't resolve this. So the best man gets the bride. That's the way that works out. But that's not what Samson had planned. And we know that because of the next chapter, really, of this story. So let's pick up at chapter 15, verse 1. After a while, in the time of wheat harvest, it happened that Samson visited his wife with a young goat. He said, "Let me go into my wife into her room," but her father would not permit him to go in. Now, pause a minute. I didn't tell all about the engagement. There was usually a dowry associated with the engagement that would have been given. In other words, Samson's parents had to pay a certain amount, whatever that was, to formalize this agreement. So again, this contract involves more than just everybody saying yes, to it. There's a monetary value that's exchanged, that's involved in what's going on here. Now, Samson goes, and he's planning to go into his wife, and the Bible is pretty good at being delicate, except when absolutely necessary. What it means is he's going to consummate the marriage, and if you don't understand that, the women can ask another woman, and the men can ask me. And we'll deal with it. But they're going to formalize the marriage. It's going to be complete on this occasion. That's his plan. And he's going to give the goat to his father-in-law, as a present, to carry this on. Her father said, "I really thought that you thoroughly hated her. Therefore, I gave her to your companion. Is not her younger sister better than she? Please take her instead." Now, if I was the young lady and found out what Daddy said, I probably wouldn't have been very happy. But nonetheless, here's what I did, and this is why. And Samson said to them, "This time I shall be blameless regarding the Philistines if I harm them." Why is he blameless? Because there was a monetary exchange in a contract that was formed, and the contract's been violated. We sometimes I think we think Samson's just a hothead and a little bit impetuous, at the very least. But no, the contract's been violated, and he says, "I've got reason to harm them." Then Samson went and caught 300 foxes, and I think King James doesn't use the word fox, if I remember right. It uses jackals. It's at least a fox-like animal. And later, what do you got? Does it say in the King James? Well, okay, there's another word could be used, jackal, which they're similar to the fox, at any rate. So he catches 300 foxes, took torches, and turned the foxes tail to tail and put a torch between each pair of tails. Now, if you don't catch me wrong here, I would like to have just seen that within itself, just the doing of it. I cannot imagine, but he did it. He succeeded. When he had set the torches on fire, he let the foxes go into the standing grain of the Philistines and burned up both the shocks and the standing grain, as well as the vineyards and olive groves. Well, I can just about see these two animals with their tails tied together with a torch in it, and they're doing everything in their power to get away, and they're probably pulling against each other and running every which way, and it just lights everything on fire, is what it does. And doesn't just burn down the wheat, it burns down the vineyards and the olive groves too. So it's pretty destructive. And all of this is where? It's in the land of the Philistines. It's all at Timnah. That's what we're talking about, in that general area. So that's his response to it. So now they have a response to his response. Then the Philistines said, "Who has done this?" And they answered, "Samson, the son-in-law of the Timnite, because he has taken his wife and given her to his companion." So the Philistines came and burned her and her father with fire. You do notice that the very thing that she was trying to avoid is the very thing that happens to her because she did what she did. She begged him and whined on him, cried on him until he finally gave her the answer. She shared it and thought she'd spared herself and her family. No, not a bit of it. Because when they found out how this happened, they punished her, which I've never totally understood. But that I don't really think it's my job to punish anybody. Could we pause a minute and think about that? The Apostle Paul may have had more reason than any of us will ever have to be really, really angry with people and want to get even with them. I want just briefly, look at 2 Timothy. It's in chapter 4, where Paul talks about these matters, writing to the young preacher. He knows he's dying, and he's relating some of the things that happened during that time frame. And listen to, several things he says. Pick up at verse 9 of chapter 4, 2 Timothy. "Be diligent to come to me quickly, for Demas has forsaken me, having loved the present world, and has departed for Thessalonica. Crescens for Galatia, Titus for Dalmatia. Only Luke is with me. Get Mark and bring him with you, for he is useful to me for ministry. And Tychicus I've sent to Ephesus. Bring the cloak that I left with Carpus at Troas when you come, and the books, especially the parchments. Alexander the coppersmith did me much harm. May the Lord repay him according to his works." You see that? See, I think that our society encourages us to get even. And I've seen that, and you've seen it over and over again. That's not the way a man of God or woman of God should work. Let God repay them. Let the Lord deal with it. That's what's mentioned here. And I think we need to see it. We need to understand that. It's not my place to get even. In fact, in the book of Romans, chapter 12, the Apostle Paul, writing to the brethren at Rome, makes a significant ending to that 12th chapter, which is filled with day-to-day Christian living, just filled with it. I thought, are you doing that chapter? Yeah, okay. We're going to do that on Wednesday nights. I'm not going to go into this in great detail, but look at the last few verses. Pick up at verse 19, Romans 12. "Beloved, do not avenge yourselves, but rather give place to wrath, for it is written, 'Vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord.' Therefore, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he's thirsty, give him drink. For in so doing, you'll heap coals of fire on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good." Okay, I'm not going to elaborate on that heavily, but you want to really, really get to somebody. Every time they try to do you harm, do them good. The way Paul describes it, it'll heap coals of fire on their head. They're just going to burn. And you wonder if that isn't a symbolic of the embarrassment. Coals of fire on the head, what would flame up? Well, I suspect if my head was on fire, my face would be red, don't you? I think that's the idea. And it's pretty good imagery for what's going to go on. So we don't have the responsibility to pay people back. The Lord will take care of it. And that's a good way to put it. But these Philistines, obviously they weren't on the Lord's side in the first place. And so they didn't follow that rule at all. So that they burn up his proposed wife and her father, and so with fire. So verse 7, Samson said to them, "Since you would do a thing like this, I will surely take revenge on you, and after that I will cease." Now, I do want to notice he is inspired by the Spirit. So does he have the right to take vengeance? The answer to that would be, as far as I understand it, yes. He can take vengeance because he's inspired of God. And yes. Okay, let me see if I'm going to try to boil that down so everybody else knows, especially people online, they have not one clue what was said. So the point, as I understand it, and if I don't get it right, you can correct me, the point is that she sees Samson as not sympathetic, that he is seemingly hot-headed, impetuous, and proud. All those seem to be a part of what goes on here. He brags about this. By the way, he's going to later on. You talk about him, just throwing off everything they throw against him. He throws all that off. So I can understand where that's coming from. The thing is, and this is where, remember, I think I told this very class some weeks ago, that when I came back from my first year at school, my dad and I had discussions. And I would try to tell him the great things I had learned. And on one occasion, I remember very specifically, he said, "Well, Gary, that doesn't work because the text tells you the answer. You cannot argue with the text." So is Samson of that nature? I'll just go, I don't know. Might be. There's elements of that I see myself that I wonder about. So I'm going to set Samson aside in that regard. But the text tells me and you, tells all of us, that the Spirit was the one that motivated this marriage idea. And why? Well, because he's getting ready to take vengeance on the Philistines. So this particular section, not talking about later when you get into, I think he made some foolish choices myself. And when I get to heaven, I'm going to check on it, because I can't be sure of that. But in this case, everything he did in this case involves beginning to deal with the Philistines. And really, his whole life is dealing with the Philistines. So I understand your point. I just think that the text tells me only one thing I can hang my hat on, and I'm going to stay there. that the Holy Spirit's behind the initial actions. Now, some of this other, I don't know. Being honest. But yeah. Yes. Uh-huh. Yeah. Oh, he will pay. He's going to pay a heavy price. Yes, sir. Okay, W.E., this is more, I would have never guessed that this would arouse discussion, but go ahead. Okay. Yeah, yes, that's a good point that W.E.'s bringing out. God uses people. No matter what their nature is, He knows how to use them. Pharaoh's nature was, I'm not letting these slaves go. I like what they're doing. And so when God says let them go, the text several times says God hardened his heart, but it also says Pharaoh hardened his heart. Well, why? Well, it's pretty easy. I mean, I'm sorry. I saw Terrence grin. Terrence, I'm not picking on you. Okay. I will almost guarantee you that Terrence knows how to make his wife mad. He said, absolutely. See, but he also knows not to do that. See, okay. Thank you, Terrence. I'm not picking. We're all that way, aren't we? I mean, you know what's disagreeable to a lot of people. Maybe your boss might be the same way, right? If I do this, my boss is not going to be happy. We know these things. So there's a sense in which when I do whatever it is, or I say whatever it is, that you could say, I made my wife mad. But there's also a sense in which you've got to say, she chose to be mad. She could have reacted another way. Pharaoh could have reacted another way, and so forth. All these stories, they could have gone a different direction. God uses people, uses Nebuchadnezzar. Boy, you talk about a prideful guy. Just read chapter 4 of Daniel and tell me he's not a prideful man. But God used him and took advantage of it. Now later, God punished him, the Babylonians. So, that's the way that works. Good point. Thank you, W.E. I wouldn't have thought of it, but with your help, it's a good point. Well, all right. So anyway, so he attacked them hip and thigh with great slaughter. Then he went down and dwelt in the cleft of the rock at Edom. Now the Philistines went up, encamped in Judah, and deployed themselves against Lehi. And the men of Judah said, why have you come up against us? So they answered, we have come up to arrest Samson, to do to him as he has done to us. Now, if you know anything about these Philistines, you can give him up or you can get burned up. I mean, there's pretty good evidence of that, right? So the men at Lehi, how are they going to react to this thing? Well, I think you probably can guess. By the way, Lehi, just as one of those little side lights, the word Lehi in Hebrew means jaw. Now, I don't know. Is it because of the shape of something? I don't know. It might be the shape. Sugarloaf Mountain, for example, in Arkansas, looks like a sugar loaf. It's a type of cake, that people make of bread, if you would. Looks just like one, like somebody just dumped it out of not a bundt pan, but a pan, and it's setting up that way. That's what it looks like. So maybe Lehi looks like a jaw. I don't know about that, but that's what they're there for. Then the 3,000 men of Judah went down to the cleft of the rock of Edom and said to Samson, do you not know that the Philistines rule over us? What is this you've done to us? And he said to them, as they did to me, so I've done to them. But they said to him, we've come down to arrest you, that we may deliver you into the hand of the Philistines. Then Samson said to them, swear to me that you will not kill me yourselves. So he understands the position they're in, and he just gets a commitment from them. He's going to deal with Philistines, but he doesn't want to hurt his own brethren, really. And so he said, you just promise me you're not going to kill me, you're not going to hurt me. Verse 13, chapter 15, Judges. So they spoke to him, saying, no, but we will tie you securely and deliver you into their hand, but we will surely not kill you. They bound him with 2 new ropes and brought him up from the rock. When he came to Lehi, the Philistines came shouting against him. Then the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon him, and the ropes that were on his arms became like flax that is burned with fire, and his bonds broke loose from his hands. Flax is it's somewhat grass-like in its nature, and 2 new ropes would be, you'd expect to be much stronger than grass has been burned with fire. Even I could probably break loose from a bondage made with grass burned with fire. Probably. I could probably snap that. And that's what happens. But of course, it's the power of God that is causing him to be able to do this. It's a mighty act on his part, and I think to an extent miraculous. That'd be my anticipation, at least, in this case. He found a fresh jawbone of a donkey, reached out his hand and took it, and killed 1,000 men with it. Now, by the way, it's possible Lehi didn't get its name until after this incident. Okay, I want you to understand, because they often name things based on an incident that happened in that place. For example, remember we studied Abraham in Genesis chapter 22. The name of that place became Jehovah Jireh, God provides, because instead of killing his son, he provided a lamb or a ram, remember? So it may be that jaw got its name in this incident. I want everybody to know that's at least a possibility. Then Samson said, he killed 1,000 men with that jawbone. Then Samson said, verse 16, with the jawbone of a donkey, heaps upon heaps, with the jawbone of a donkey, I've slain 1,000 men. And so it was, when he'd finished speaking, that he threw the jawbone from his hand and called the place Ramath Lehi. And that basically means jawbone height, is what it basically means. Then he became very thirsty. So he cried out to the Lord and said, you've given this great deliverance by the hand of your servant, and now shall I die of thirst and fall into the hand of the uncircumcised? Now we're getting a little bit of support for what you were talking about. Here comes Samson, and he's kind of wrapped up in himself. I mean, it appears he is. And again, I want to ask these questions when I get to heaven. I don't know what God's going to just cause us to know or what we're going to have to ask, but I wonder about it. Yeah. I understand your thinking, but I'm not going to deny. I don't know Samson's nature. I just know God used it. Whatever the nature was, he used it and made it happen. So he does seem a little bit self-centered here. He's probably not going to die of thirst. Hasn't been that long. Probably not going to happen. But that's what he's saying is going to take place. So God split the hollow place that is in Lehi, and water came out, and he drank, and his spirit returned, and he revived. Therefore he called its name En Hakkore, which is in Lehi to this day. And that means tooth hollow. Tooth hollow. See, so you got a jawbone. What kind of hollow place would you find in the jawbone? Well, I guess a tooth was there one time. I mean, that's the idea. And he drinks water from tooth hollow on jawbone height. Is what he done. All those names we know for sure came because of Samson's incident. Then verse 20, and he judged Israel 20 years in the days of the Philistines. Now, what does that entail? I don't know that I know everything that being a judge entails, but what I do know is that God used these judges to do two things. One, to set his people free, which perhaps the killing of the 1,000 had done that. We would have to assume that. And two, the judge would try to direct people toward what God wanted done. He would, in Deborah's case, she administered justice under a tree. So they'd come to her and she'd rule based on the law of Moses. Maybe Samson did that, something like that. I don't know. But he ruled 20 years, so they got 20 peaceful years that go on here. But you want to talk about people that never forget? The Philistines are never forgetters. And we're not going to deal with it this week, but next week when we come to the next chapter, we're going to see that the Philistines are not through with Samson. And as was observed already, Samson, in the end, is going to pay a pretty good price for the whole thing. But he's going to make the Philistines pay too. It's an interesting story. I do want to make an observation. I made a time or two in various classes, maybe this one. To me, the strength of Scripture, the strength of believing that it's the Word of God, comes in part from the fact that the heroes, so to speak, of Scripture are not without flaws. God doesn't hide their flaws. They're all right there for you. You know, Abraham lies twice. Now that's remarkable. Noah gets drunk. Samson, well, if it isn't pride, it sure looks like it, you know, as we go along. And he ends up paying for it as well. And it's that way throughout. Peter denies the Lord. You know, 3 times he denies the Lord. And yet on Pentecost, he's the primary speaker, according to the way Luke reports it. Primary speaker. So I observe, you know, if we were writing a book claiming that it was from God, all the heroes would be perfect. Because they're God's people, right? God knows my people are not perfect, but I love them anyway, and I can use them anyway. And that's a pretty good message. Yes, sir. Very good. Yes. Yeah. Others, our brethren can use us, and yet we're imperfect. We can use our brethren. They're going to be imperfect too. I closed out a meeting Wednesday night with the folks in Allen's, Tennessee, and that was one of the comments I made. I said, they've got a preacher who's been there about 2 years, roughly 2 years. And I said, you know, take them in. Make them part of your family. Well, I usually say it is, get them to place membership, you know, because you don't want the preacher to be a foreigner. You know, he shouldn't always feel like an outsider. I'll feel like part of a family. And I said, he and his family are going to make mistakes. I said, forgive them, love them, just like you would your family. Because guess what? That's what they're going to do with you. And it's true, isn't it? We all make mistakes. We all need forgiveness. If we'd act more like a family, families get mad at each other. Maybe yours never did, but you know, my sisters could be pretty angry with me days gone by. But you know, we usually made up. Sometimes it's because Mama made us all hug in a 3-person hug and sing angry words to each other. But now I can't sing that song without grinning, you know, from ear to ear. You know, it worked. You know, we loved each other. So interesting point. Thank you. That's a good point. Okay, so next week pick up with chapter 16 in this great story. Now, quickly, brethren, it is amazing to me where all you can talk to somebody about their soul. Yesterday, I believe yesterday, no, the day before, Friday, I talked to a fellow standing in line at the pharmacy. He was there, you know, you haven't got a whole lot to do standing in line. They don't provide anything for you. You just stand there. And we started communicating, and I found out that the place where he worships hadn't started meeting in person yet. I said, well, we're meeting in person. Why don't you come join us? See, little thing, little opportunity. You can do the same thing with Bible studies, with, you know, all kinds of things. Please be constantly aware. My prayer for days and days and days has been, help us. I mean us, not you, us. Be more soul conscious. So I hope you're all doing that. And by the way, if you got the Realm app on your phone, especially if it's an iPhone and it's newer, you should be able to check yourself in today. If you've never tried that, try it. If you can't figure it out, talk to Derek. Maybe he can help you. I tried to help one person and I got lost real quick. So thank you.